share with you today.
It's beautiful, and I can't wait to hear the story.
Okay, so it's called Blue Ridge Love, and the reason it's called Blue Ridge Love is I got married.
Congratulations!
Yeah. And so we got married in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I wanted to have a quilt that kind of commemorated that major life event.
Sure.
And I made it big. I made it really big. So I'm just so in love with this quilt, and one of the reasons I love it is that it's based on a super traditional block with just a little kind of tweak to it, just a little kind of tweak. So the Delectable Mountains block, which I thought made sense for the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Delectable Mountains block is traditionally done from a half square triangle. So this half square triangle, I just want you to show how the traditional one is made. Traditionally, you would subcut that Delectable Mountain, that half square triangle, into strips, and then when you rotate these strips, you get this staggered mountain. Okay, so the problem though with this traditional block is that it doesn't become a square, it becomes a rectangle.
Right, you start off with a square, and then when you take away the seam allowances, we've got rectangular mountains.
And my blocks are 4 of these together to make the main block.
Right.
And it couldn't be rectangles, it had to be squares. So I want to show you how I just tweaked it a little bit so I could get squares for my Delectable Mountains. All right, so I'm going to put these aside, and we're going to start with an 11-inch square of fabric, and I've got cream and I've got my blues here, and then I have drawn a diagonal line, and we're going to make half square triangles from these. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to go and put a line of stitching 1/4 of an inch on each side of that drawn line. So start out with an 11-inch, 2 11-inch squares. And then I'm going to trim these down to 10 inches. So I made them just a little bit bigger. And then we'll trim them down.
I think it's nice to start with oversized blocks anytime you're working with half square triangles. It just kind of gives you a little room to groove.
Yeah. All right, so go ahead and cut that on the diagonal.
Okay.
And you know, we like to do 8 at a time half square triangles. And so one of the things that I also did with this after I got tired of doing all these half square triangles is did a big, like 22-inch square of fabric, and then did, 8 at a time half square triangles out of that granddaddy big piece of fabric. But it's
like
a lot.
Production sewing.
It's a lot of fabric. So we're just doing it with the 11-inch.
I made a big assumption here that we're pressing to the dark blue.
Yes, good assumption. Very good assumption. All right, so I have one here already pressed, and I have it already trimmed down to that 10-inch size.
Okay.
And so here's where that magic happens. If you could hand me that smaller, So first we're going to make a 2.5-inch cut. So if you can make a 2.5-inch cut on that side.
Sure.
And then we're going to make a 2.5-inch cut on this side.
So how many blocks did you make to figure this out?
Yeah, it took a few. It took a few just because I was wrestling with that. I kept like stomping my foot saying, I want a square, not a rectangle. And I have a lovely friend who helps me, Melanie Peterson is her name, and she helps me kind of think this through. She's fantastic. So I credit her with helping me figure out how to get this into a square again. Okay, so we need to actually trim off on these 2 that you just cut. I need to trim off 1.5 inches away from the point, right? Because we don't want to screw our points up. So 1.5 inches there.
Okay.
And then you'll also do on the other one that you subcut 1.5 inches off of it.
Perfect. There's that guy.
Yeah, and then that one. And then we're just dealing with the center portion of the mountains. All right, so there's those 2 edges. Now for this one, we're going to do 3/4 of an inch top and bottom. So it's the same amount we're chopping off.
Okay.
Right? We chopped off 1.5 inches.
Total.
It's just that we're splitting it between the north and the south
that makes
of
sense.
these. So 3/4 on the top and 3/4 on the bottom.
There's that.
And then we'll subcut this unit into that 2.5-inch strip. So we'll have the right number of strips. Perfect. All right, so 2.5 inch. And then we'll have our little guys that we can flip. Now, I have some fabric that I keep on hand that I'm not super in love with, and then I make a block out of it so that I can figure out what I Did I pick up one? I must have picked up one from the wrong. No, that was the one that we did. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we've got these laid out. Now that they're cut apart and trimmed, now we do the turn
part.
Yeah, now we turn it. So we just rotate everybody in the same direction. There we go.
I thought it was a lot more complicated than that.
It's
literally
not.
just a
It's literally,
180
yeah.
degree turn, huh?
All right, so I'm gonna do that one. Put it through. And it did take a little while for me to kind of wrestle through this. Like I said, my friend Melanie really helped a great deal.
Yeah.
But you know, anytime I'm doing a block that I'm not sure of,
There you go.
I'll use some test fabric to kind of make sure I understand it. Do you do that?
Yeah. I think you said that you have like fabric that you didn't love, and I
Yeah.
have what was I thinking fabric? Like what was I thinking that day when I bought that fabric?
And you use that.
I use that, but sometimes I really have to use something that I like to get inspired by it. Otherwise, I feel like I'm making blocks that I don't enjoy, and it's not as much fun for me. So I just buy lots of what I like, and that way.
Well, you know what they say about ugly fabric, right?
What?
You just haven't cut it small enough.
I like that. That's cute. That's cute.
Okay, so open your side up.
Okay.
All right, so we're back to
There.
Yep.
There it is.
There it is. Okay, and then we're gonna sew those two strips together,
It's fun.
and then we will press it. Yeah, and it's helpful to have a block, whether it's made out of fabric you're not in love with, or fabric that you know is going to be in the quilt, to kind of set aside and look at.
Yeah.
Because you can get turned around.
I love having a reference block. I'll make a block or two, make sure that I've got it all figured out, keep it close by so they don't get twisted around.
Yeah, it's easy to get twisted around. Sometimes it depends. Okay, so we would press all of that out.
Okay.
So go ahead and give that a press. I've got this one here done.
Alrighty.
And so now we're gonna take this, now that we've made it square, now we're gonna take it and add a little extra zhuzh to it.
A little pizzazz.
A little pizzazz, okay.
Yes.
So the first thing I'm gonna do is put a flippy corner on this longer piece